video is about double leg tabletop, how to get into that position and work those abdominals effectively. This position is something that we use in supine on the mat quite a lot. We use it in both our intermediate and intermediate advanced classes. It's not to say that you have to be in a double leg tabletop position to be in our intermediate mixed classes, but if you can work effectively in that position, then we would like you to. So it may be worth your while getting an instructor to help you into this position once or two times, just so that you are able to work effectively with an abdominal and pelvic floor connection and in a neutral spine setting. We teach this position in neutral spine, although there are some cases where some people may work more effectively in a more imprinted spine position. But that's something, again, by a case-by-case individual status, that if you are working one-on-one or in an instructor setting, they can give you that as an alternative option. I'm showing you today in a neutral spine setting because here at Precise Pilates, that's how we teach double leg tabletop and almost all of our exercises exclusively. So unusually, we're actually going to start in 4-point kneeling. Yes, we will be looking at the position laying on our back, but first I want you to look at your spinal shape in a box position because it can help you later on transfer this laying on your back. So we're going to begin in 4-point kneeling box with shoulder directly over palm and knee directly underneath hip joint. Your box position is your shoulder to shoulder, shoulder to hip bone across the back of your pelvis, and then hip back up to shoulder, drawing a beautiful and precise box. Now here in this position, with nothing turned on, you may be more in this position or in this position. I want you to think about first setting the upper back into a flat position along the shoulder blades. If you are rounded through your back, I want you to relax the shoulder blades down from the ceiling and then lengthen through the back of the neck, drawing the shoulder blades softly down to your waistline. Here we have a nice flat upper back. If you tend to wing through your scapula and drop your chest between your arms, you will notice that you do have a lumbar spine arch, which may be causing your hips to tip forwards into an anterior or forwards pelvic tilt. From this position, I do want you to think about gently pressing off of the arms and chest and drawing the shoulder blades back up in line with the shoulder girdle and then locating them down softly into your waistline. Here you should have flat upper back without the scapula, the shoulder blades, winging out the back of the body. Now turn your attention to my lumbar spine and pelvis area. At the moment I am switched off. It's quite natural to have a lordotic curve in your back, but we want to try and work in neutral. So if you are lordotic, this part is particularly focused towards you, but everybody will need to find connection in your box. So we're going to start by taking a soft breath in and lifting your pelvic floor. As we lift our pelvic floor here, we may find that the tailbone drops gently down. Did you notice that little butt wink? It went from an anterior or a forwards pelvic tilt into a more subtle position. Adding on here, as we exhale to lift the contents of the belly from the mat, we are thinking about flattening from hip bone to hip bone at the front of the pelvis and narrowing the hip bones closer together. We are switching on the transverse band of abdominals and we now have a strong connection. Did you notice that my lumbar spine arch softly moved into a more neutral alignment? I'll show you again. Switching off both my pelvic floor and abdominals, I'm going to take a soft breath in to inhale and lift my pelvic floor. A very gentle draw down of the tailbone into a soft neutral position. As I exhale, I'm switching on the transverse band and you may have noticed my lumbar spine arch is a little bit more subtle and more of a neutral position. This here is something we can translate into laying on your back when we are looking at our tabletop position. Again, just have a look at what my tailbone does as I recruit both my pelvic floor and abdominals. A lift on the inward breath and an exhale. Did you notice how my lumbar spine arch also moved into a softer neutral position? Not arched, not rounded, but neutral. I want you to keep that in your mind's eye as we go down to lay on our back in supine for our double leg tabletop. So we've made it this far, let's lay down on our back. Make sure you have a pillow close at hand for those of you that need to take some pressure off of the neck or to help realign the cervical spine into a more neutral position. Lay yourself down on your back. Now as we come down to lay on our back, we want bent knees and we want the feet at hip width, aligning the second toe to the knee and the hip joint, the ASIS. We want to have a nice stable base and we want a nice neutral lumbar spine and a neutral pelvis, i.e. our ASIS or hip bones and our pubic bone is creating a beautiful floating triangle on the front of your pelvis. Neither your pubic bone nor your hip bones are higher than one another. The triangle is flat and floating. You have a natural arch in your lower back, and here at Precise Pilates we teach our exercises in this neutral spine setting, and we like to promote the natural curves of your lumbar spine. Good. We would like to now find both pelvic floor and our abdominal connection here on the mat without moving out of this neutral spine. If you need help, it's easy to ask an instructor in a face-to-face setting to help you find this connection, which can be particularly difficult to find in your first few classes. I won't go through that here, but just in case, for my regulars, inhale pelvic floor, exhale T-zone. Good. Once you've got your connection, allow your head to rest back on your pillow and soften your shoulders. From this point, we're going to work into a single leg tabletop exercise so that we make sure we're keeping this very strong control over our pelvis and lower back. Take a nice soft breath in. As we exhale, sinking ribs in and down towards the hip bones to find the oblique lines on. Take a deep breath in here. Exhale the T-zone, flattening as we lift one foot from the mat. Knee over hip. Now you should feel like the belly is flattening to help lift the leg. It's not just the hip flexor, but the belly itself. We don't want to feel like the belly is arching or pulled forwards as we take one foot off the mat. Remember, we're trying to keep our triangle floating on our pelvis level and our lumbar spine in neutral. This is not a neutral pelvic placement, and neither is this, where we suppress the lumbar spine to the mat and drop the hip bones back to the rib cage. So, once the foot is off the mat in single leg tabletop, toe taps is what you're going to work into. We're going to exhale, tap the toe, ribs sinking in and down, T-zone flattening across the belt line. Inhale, knee over hip for your tabletop. Exhale, tap the toe to the mat, T-zone. Inhale, float knee over hip. Nice and simple. Use your rib cage activation. Exhale, ribs in and down, flattening through the T-zone, not the lumbar spine. Inhale, knee over hip. You can make it more challenging by tapping further from the glutes. Keep a bend in the knee, and you can work into a much larger range, really trying to challenge your connection to your neutral spine. You can always have your hands here on your belt line to check your abdominals are not popping forwards or doming, and you can have one hand in your lower back if you'd like to control or feel that you're not bringing the lumbar spine into the mat and suppressing the back into imprinted. Once you've done a couple of these toe taps, we can take it to the other side. Pop the foot down, let's change. We're going to go into toe taps. We've got T-zone working. Take your breath in. Exhale, rib towards hip. We're flattening the belly, drawing the hip bones together to bring the leg off the mat. Hand on that belly, check that the belly didn't pop up. You didn't arch your back or lose this lovely rib to hip oblique connection. Neutral spine, level pelvis. Exhale, tap the toe, flattening through the belly, rib to hip. Inhale, knee over hip. Exhale, and inhale. Here's your toe taps. If you're working at a larger range, you can tap further from your glutes. Keep a bend in the knee. Try to support a nice neutral spine. You may feel that the band of abdominals that is over your belt line is thickening up to 5 inches here. We're really working into the transverse abdominis, and we want to support this lovely neutral spine connection. Once we've done a few toe taps on this side, bring your foot back over your hip joint here and pause. Now I do want you to think about what would happen if the second leg came off. Here we're going to look at a supported double leg tabletop position. Take a nice soft breath in here. Keep your knee aligned over your hip, the quadricep firing. Now just like you did when you were in your 4-point kneeling box, think about here, the soft lift of pelvic floor. We already have it activated. You can add a gentle lift into that activation to give you a little bit more support. Have one hand in your lower back if it helps, and one just over your abdominals below your belly button. Now I want you to think about an exhale. I want you to think about that gentle draw down of the tailbone and that sinking in of the abdominals, not the lower back to the mat, remember, neutral spine, but the flattening of the belly and the two hip bones narrowing to help you lift the second leg off the mat. With your hand on these abdominals, you shouldn't jump the belly forwards or arch through the rib cage. I'll show you again. Here in your single leg tabletop position, a nice neutral spine. You take a nice soft breath in. Add a soft lift if you want a little bit more pelvic floor activation. As we exhale, think about that gentle glide down of the tailbone, similar to your 4-point kneeling box. Think about the draw in of the abdominals, the hip bones narrowing. Notch your lower back to the mat. We're not rolling the hips back. We're trying to support keeping the triangle flat, the belly flattening as we float the second leg off the mat. And here is your tabletop position. If you'd like, you can work your toe taps in this position, alternating the tapping of the toe. Exhale, rib towards hip, flattening the belly, not the lumbar spine. Inhale, knee over hip, alternating sides. This can also be done at an extended range, working deeper into the transverse abdominis and supporting a neutral spine, challenging, keeping a soft bend in the knee, even if you're reaching further from the buttocks here. Trying not to let this lowering of the leg arch the back, because then we're not working in stability and we're actually at an increased risk of really damaging some joints in the between the vertebrae discs. You have some little discs that we wouldn't like to keep suppressing and squashing. So i.e. keeping the spine in this position and working within this nice neutral spine setting with some abdominal pressure, intra-abdominal pressure here, low intra-abdominal pressure I should add, through your pelvic floor and transverse abdominis activation. Once you've done a few on each side, I want you to come back down the way that you came up. Take your soft breath in. We're going to bring one foot back to the mat. Keep one leg over tabletop, a deep breath in here. And as we exhale, sink the rib towards the hip, flattening the belly. You can bring the second leg down. I don't ever want to see you bring 2 feet back to the mat. Did you see what happened here? I let go completely and I really arched my back. It can be very, very harmful for you if you are working with a back condition which prevents you going into extreme ranges of extension in your lower back. So we always come up 1 foot at a time, supported through a neutral spine, and we always come back down the same way. I want to show you the difference between imprinted spine, what we call safe spine at Precise Pilates, and neutral spine, okay? Now, neutral spine and safe spine, there's not a lot of difference. Very similar in visuals to my box position, where I went from the activated position, okay? In that activated position, I was in a neutral spine alignment. I'll show you what I mean here. So, I'm taking a full chi ball, I'm popping it between my tailbone and the mat, and I'm rolling myself back down. Now I want to make sure my pelvis is on the ball, not the lower back. My lumbar spine, I'm able to fit my wrist, possibly my forearm, and my glutes are floating. Okay? Feet are back at hip width, in line with my ASIS. At this point, I can have a little jiggle around. I can do a little bit of posterior pelvic tilting here, and you'll notice as I tip my hips back towards my rib cage, lifting my pubic bone, I'm coming into a imprinted spine shape, although my lumbar spine doesn't meet the mat. It can't, I'm floating. I can also go into a forwards pelvic tilt and show you the arching or the lifting, flaring on my ribs, and the arching of my lower back away from neutral too. Here my pubic bone's lower than my hip bones, so again I'm not in a nice neutral pelvic placement. Neutral is a soft lumbar spine arch, very similar to a very natural arch in your spine. And here we have hip bones and pubic bone level, okay? In this position, in neutral, I'm able to switch on both my pelvic floor and abdominals, my transverse band. And once I'm switched on, I can add a soft draw down of my rib to hip, so I've got my obliques on in that frontal line. From this position, I'm going to show you a single leg tabletop. I'm going to exhale, flattening my abdominals between my hip bones narrowing, bringing one foot off the mat. My pelvis did not shift here. In fact, it's staying supported in neutral using that T-zone activation. Take a soft breath in. On the exhale, I'm going to think about lengthening the tailbone down the chi ball surface. Did you see that little lengthen? I'll undo it here and show you. I'll show you again. I'm thinking about lengthening just the tailbone. I'm not tilting my hips back. I'm not trying to arch my lower back. I'm not trying to lift my rib cage. All I'm thinking about here is lengthening the tailbone down the chi ball. Very, very minor. Undo it here and I'll show you again. Exhale. I've almost felt like I've really switched on those oblique lines. Almost to the point where I could balance enough, take a soft breath in, exhale and bring the second leg off, floating on a fully inflated chi ball. Now obviously this is a lot of balance. I'm able to do this because I've practiced this numerous times and I know my arms are by my side and I'm nice and safe in contact with the mat with my upper body. If I was to imprint my spine, i.e. tip my hips back towards my rib cage and let my pubic bone be higher than my hip bones, this position would be quite challenging to stay balanced in. I'm rounded over the top circumference of the ball, so I'm quite unstable. If I was to try to get up in this position, I would find, whoa, I probably could just about, but now my knees are so close towards my chest that I'm almost lifted completely off of my pelvis off the ball. And I'm almost in what we call a rollover. So imprinted spine would not work in this position. Let's come back down. If I was in a forwards pelvic tilt and an arched lower back, it would be quite hard to bring myself up onto the ball because my hips would want to slip off the ball here and take me away from my pillow and off the ball completely. And now the ball is in my lower back. That place I told you didn't want to have it in the first place. So if you want to play around on your ball, you can be quite safe. It's only a small movement. Position your pelvis on. Make sure you're in your neutral spine. You can fit your forearm, maybe your wrist in your lower back. Okay, the ball is definitely directly underneath your belt line. From here, you can switch on pelvic floor, transverse band, and also a soft draw down of rib to hip, switching on these frontal obliques. Once we've got this connection, take a nice soft breath in. We're going to exhale through T-zone to bring one foot off the mat. Good. In this position, knee is over hip, and we're quite safe. One foot is down, both arms are by my side. Take a nice soft breath in. If you'd like, think about the soft draw down of your tailbone, down the circumference of your ball. If you've lengthened your tailbone, you may also think about the soft draw in of the belly button. And the belly button wants to draw in as we take the second foot off the mat. Hand could be here in these lower abdominals below your belly button, checking that the belly isn't going to jump up into the hands. If it does jump up and dome, you'll find that you might jerk through your lower back and you might find that your legs wiggle around. And you might find that your pelvic floor has an increased pressure pushed down through it. So, i.e., do this work slowly and do it mindfully. Come down the same way that you came up, bringing one foot down, and the second leg without jarring the back from the ball, without tilting the hips back, and without the belly popping forwards and creating any downwards force through that pelvic floor. If you are at all unsure, get an instructor to show you how to come up effectively for your body.